Imagine deciding to build, the most complex, just insanely expensive money-making machine in the history of human civilization.
Right, something on a scale we've never really seen.
Exactly. Like, you secure $5.3 trillion in funding. You are literally boring through mountains for copper. You're redirecting rivers to cool your servers.
You're even restarting dormant nuclear power plants just to keep the lights on.
Yeah, just for the electricity. And right as you finish putting, the final coat of paint on this magnificent toll booth you've built, you look across the street.
And you realize your biggest competitor is standing right there.
Standing there, and they are handing out the exact same machine, completely for free, to literally anyone who walks by.
It's the ultimate economic paradox. I mean, you're constructing this absolute fortress of capital, assuming the walls are going to protect your future profits.
Right.
Entirely oblivious to the fact that the very concept of a wall has just been open sourced.
And that inverted reality, that's the foundation of our deep dive today. So, welcome.
Glad to be here.
We are exploring a perspective today that is, it's very stark. It's numbers-driven, highly philosophical, and it completely flips the conventional wisdom about the global AI arms race.
It really does. It flips everything on its head.
The premise we are analyzing essentially asks, what happens when human cognition, like the literal act of thinking and reasoning, becomes a free, infinitely copyable commodity?
Which is a heavy concept for anyone to wrap their mind around.
It is. And before we get into the actual mechanics of how this is happening, I need to lay down a unique ground rule for you, the listener, as you join us on this deep dive today.
Oh, this is important.
Yeah. There are no conclusions today.
None. We have to leave our desire for, a neat, tidy resolution at the door.
Exactly. Our mission here is an open exploration. The landscape of artificial intelligence economics is shifting so violently right now that looking for firm answers is basically a fool's errand.
Right. Instead, we're hunting for better, sharper questions. We need to look at this revolution through a completely different and, frankly, kind of unsettling lens.
Geopolitically and economically.
Yeah. You, as the listener, you need to suspend your assumptions about how tech businesses are supposed to work, how market capitalization functions, and honestly, how superpowers compete.
So, okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the ledger.
Yeah.
Because to even approach the philosophy here, you have to look at the cold, hard math first.
And the math is terrifying.
It is staggering. The capital expenditure, the CapEx. When you look at the 4 largest U.S. hyperscalers, the tech giants actually building the cloud and AI infrastructure.
Right, the big guys.
Yeah. They are planning roughly $725 billion in capital expenditure for the year 2026 alone.
Just let that number sit in your head for a second. $725 billion. In a 12-month window.
It's hard to even conceptualize.
Well, put it into historical context, right? That single-year projection represents a 77% increase from what was already a record-breaking $410 billion spend.
Right.
We are looking at a rate of capital acceleration that basically has almost no precedent in modern industrial history.
None at all.
And if you stretch that timeline out just a bit further, you look at projections from places like Goldman Sachs. They suggest a cumulative spend of $5.3 trillion between 2025 and 2030.
Trillion, with a T. But here is where the math hits an absolute brick wall. The revenue reality check is like getting hit with a bucket of ice water.
It really is.
In 2025, AI-related services delivered roughly $25 billion in revenue, but that was against more than $250 billion in infrastructure spending for that same period.
Right, so you're looking at an ecosystem that generates about 10 cents of revenue for every single dollar of capital expenditure it burns.
10 cents, which, forces a very uncomfortable conversation about what this investment actually is.
Exactly. I mean, in a normal business cycle, a 10-cent return on a dollar of heavy infrastructure spend, maybe that's acceptable if you're building, say, a railroad.
Or like a telecommunications network, right?
Yeah, something where you're going to monopolize a market for the next 50 years. The assumption baked into this $5.3 trillion spend is that AI is the ultimate scarce resource.
Right, that whoever builds the biggest net is going to capture all future global productivity.
Exactly. It's a systemic wager on the future value of intelligence itself.
But let me challenge the rationality of that wager. Because if I decide to build a multi-billion-dollar highway system and my entire business plan is to stand at the end of the road and collect pennies at a toll booth,
right,
At what point does an investor look at me and just say, hey, the math here doesn't work?
Right. How can the market look at 10 cents on the dollar and respond by saying, please spend faster?
Is it visionary, or is it just an overheated market completely detached from economic reality?
And that tension, that's exactly why we're seeing this massive silent migration happening right beneath the surface of the industry.
The shift to the east.
Yes. While Western companies are raising hundreds of billions to build bigger toll booths, the actual users of these systems are finding a completely different route. By mid-2026, the data shows U.S. companies were routing up to 46% of their open router tokens to Chinese open models.
Which is just a jaw-dropping jump, because a year earlier that was around 4.5%.
Exactly. 4.5 to 46% in a year.
And just for those listening who might not be familiar with the plumbing here, an open router token essentially represents a unit of AI work, right?
Yes, exactly. A question asked, a block of code written, an image analyzed.
So what you are saying is that nearly half of the actual workload being generated by Western companies is being quietly offloaded to foreign-built open-source AI models.
That is exactly what's happening.
But why?
Because the foreign models run 60 to 90% cheaper while offering totally comparable reasoning capabilities. They're abandoning the toll booth because the toll is mathematically unjustifiable. I mean, if you're a startup trying to scale an app that requires millions of inferences a day, you honestly don't care about the branding of the neural network.
No, you care about your margin.
Exactly. And if you can purchase the exact same cognitive output for pennies on the dollar, the decision just makes itself.
Which begs the absolute foundational question for this whole deep dive. What happens to a multi-trillion-dollar business model when the core product you're selling, the thing you went into massive debt to produce, can just be acquired from a geopolitical rival for 90% less?
Well, it shatters the illusion of scarcity. I mean, the entire Western thesis is built on operating a scarcity business.
Right.
The data centers, the soaring stock valuations, the massive energy contracts, they all rely on this fundamental assumption that advanced AI will remain the scarce, highly complex utility
that only a few trillion-dollar companies can provide, so they dictate the price.
Exactly. But the strategy coming out of the East is the exact opposite. They're actively destroying the very concept of scarcity.
They're paving a totally free, multi-lane highway right next to our incredibly expensive toll booth.
Yes. Releasing open weights, which essentially means publishing the core, trained intelligence of a model for anyone to download for free. It's not open source charity.
No, it's a weapon.
It is a calculated structural weapon of commoditization.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the underlying philosophy is brilliantly aggressive. It's like, if you can't win the frontier, make the frontier worthless.
Perfectly said. If you lack the raw capital and the advanced silicon to build a model that's, say, 5% smarter than the top Western model, you just change the rules.
You build a model that's 99% as good, and you give it away to the entire planet.
And by doing so, you instantly drag the clearing price of human-level cognition right down to zero.
And there are historical parallels here from the text that are just fascinating to pull apart. We saw Japan execute a really similar playbook to systematically dismantle the American consumer electronics industry in the late 20th century.
Right, and more recently we watched China do the exact same thing to the global solar panel market.
Yeah, they flood the zone, they scale production until unit economics drop below the floor, drive the price of the commodity to near zero.
And then the expensive Western incumbents, who completely rely on high margins just to survive, they simply suffocate.
The mechanics of that playbook are well documented.
Yeah.
But the terrifying prospect here for Western tech giants is the nature of the commodity itself.
Right. We aren't talking about televisions or, photovoltaic cells. The commodity being crushed to zero is cognition, the ability to think.
But I actually have to push back on that historical comparison for a second.
Okay, go for it.
Because solar panels and consumer electronics, those are physical goods. They require raw materials, physical supply chains, shipping logistics, manual labor. Once you build a solar panel, you still have to put it on a boat. But AI models are software. They're just mathematical weights and parameters.
Which means the marginal cost of distribution is practically zero.
Right. So does the old industrial dumping playbook actually work when the commodity isn't physical, but is literally the abstraction of thought?
And that is the precise ambiguity we have to live in today. We have to ask if intelligence can truly be priced at zero in the long run.
Because if thought becomes a basic utility, just background infrastructure like municipal water, does it lose its premium entirely.
Well, you could argue there will always be a premium for a quote-unquote better thought. Like, a brilliant legal strategy is worth infinitely more than a mediocre one, right? Even if the mediocre one is free.
But consider the economic reality of the enterprise software market right now.
Okay.
If the baseline level of brilliant becomes absolutely free, like if a downloadable open source model can pass the bar exam or write production level code or diagnose medical images with 95% accuracy for free, then the premium you can charge for your proprietary model that is 97% accurate shrinks drastically.
Because the marginal utility of that extra 2% simply cannot justify a $5.3 trillion capital expenditure.
Exactly. Which leads us directly into, I guess, the psychological and financial trap these hyperscalers find themselves in.
The logic of the trapped.
Right. Because if the free road is actively being paved and the market is already migrating to models that are 90% cheaper, the rational business decision would be to pause.
You'd hit the brakes, you'd stop building the ultra-expensive toll booths until the market settles.
But they aren't stopping. They are accelerating. Why? If the math is flashing red, why on earth do you double down?
Because the capital itself has become a hostage. At this massive scale, the ongoing investment is the only thing maintaining the illusion of the company's valuation.
Right.
When you're spending $200 billion a year on infrastructure, stopping that spend is essentially a public admission that the terminal value you sold to your investors was a complete fiction.
Let's actually break down what terminal value means in this context, because honestly, it is the linchpin holding up the global economy right now.
It really is.
Terminal value is the assumed future worth of a project or a company at the end of a projection period. It assumes stable, massive cash flows extending out to infinity.
Right, so the trillion-dollar valuations of these tech giants, they are not based on the $25 billion they made last year.
No. They are entirely based on the terminal value, the assumption that in, say, 2035, they will hold an absolute monopoly on global digital intelligence.
And if a CEO suddenly halts the data center build-out today, they are signaling to Wall Street that the terminal value might actually be zero.
And the sheer gravity of that realization would cause an immediate collapse in their stock price.
Exactly. And because the market is so heavily concentrated in these few tech stocks, this isn't just an isolated sector problem. It creates a systemic chain reaction.
The fiction of infinite future AI wealth is currently the primary pillar holding up the S&P 500.
Right. And think about what that means for you listening right now. The S&P 500 isn't just some abstract ticker on a financial screen.
No, it is the engine of American retirement accounts. It's your 401k. It's the pension funds for teachers and firefighters.
That index holds up consumer confidence, which drives consumer spending, which holds up the physical brick-and-mortar economy.
The entire financial stack is resting on the assumption that AI intelligence will remain scarce and expensive.
Which draws a very uncomfortable but structurally perfect parallel to the 2006 mortgage securitization crisis.
Oh, wow, yeah.
During the housing bubble, the systemic danger wasn't merely that, a few underlying houses in Nevada or Florida were worthless.
Right, it was the derivatives.
Exactly. The catastrophic danger was that the complex financial derivatives, the pricing of trillions of dollars of assets, they assumed a future reality of perpetually rising housing prices that was mathematically impossible to sustain.
And today, the derivatives are the tech valuations. And they assume a future of proprietary high-margin AI that is actively being dismantled by open-source competitors.
Right. We actually saw a preview of this exact fragility recently. Look at the DeepSeek R1 event.
Oh, that was wild.
A foreign lab released a highly capable reasoning model built for a fraction of the cost of Western models, using a fraction of the compute power.
And the market reaction was violent. It wiped $590 billion off NVIDIA's market cap in a single trading day.
Over $500 billion of assumed value just evaporated in hours, simply because a cheaper alternative proved it was possible to achieve the same result without buying massive amounts of new hardware.
But pay close attention to how the Western hyperscalers responded to that warning shot. They didn't hit the brakes.
No, they actually raised their capital expenditure guidance. They committed to buying more chips, building more data centers, securing more power.
It defies all traditional business logic. You see concrete proof that your core product is being commoditized, and your response is to spend more money to produce it.
It is what the source text brilliantly refers to as the logic of the trapped.
The logic of the trapped.
When you are entirely captured by a narrative, the only available answer to the growing fear that your core asset is overpriced is to buy more of it.
And to do it as loudly as possible.
Yes. You have to project such overwhelming, irrational confidence that the market doesn't dare question the underlying math. It's just financial theater at a macroeconomic scale.
Have you ever found yourself sinking time and money into a failing project just to prove to yourself that your initial decision wasn't a mistake?
Oh, absolutely.
Like maybe you bought an expensive piece of gym equipment, never used it, but you kept buying the expensive maintenance subscriptions just to maintain the illusion that you were going to use it one day.
Right, the sunk cost fallacy.
Yes. Now imagine doing that. Scale that deeply human psychological flaw up to the level of the global equities market. We are talking about sinking trillions of dollars of global wealth into an infrastructure project to protect our collective ego from admitting we mispriced the future.
It really forces us to question the very fabric of economic confidence. Are we witnessing the messy, volatile birth of a new technological era that will eventually find its equilibrium?
Or are we collectively participating in the largest sunk cost fallacy in human history?
But, we should play devil's advocate here because the hyperscalers and the bullish investors, they have a very specific counter-argument to this sort of doomsday scenario.
Okay, what is it?
They argue we are looking at this too statically. They say if the price of AI drops by 90%, it doesn't mean revenues disappear. It means usage explodes. If it becomes virtually free to run an AI agent, then every single business, application, and human on Earth will run hundreds of them simultaneously.
Okay, so what we're talking about here is the classic Jevons paradox.
Exactly, the Jevons paradox.
For those who don't know, this is an economic principle from the 19th century. William Stanley Jevons observed that when technological improvements increased the efficiency of coal use, it didn't lead to a decrease in coal consumption.
The exact opposite happened.
Right. Because it was cheaper and more efficient, industries found entirely new ways to use it, and the aggregate demand for coal just skyrocketed.
So the Western tech argument basically relies on the Jevons paradox. Cheaper AI means astronomical, unprecedented demand for AI inference.
Which will fill all those expensive new data centers and generate massive revenues.
Right. And the logic holds perfectly when you're predicting the overall trajectory of human technology adoption, the volume of AI inference, the sheer amount of compute cycles being used globally, it will absolutely explode.
Right.
The Jevons paradox is totally correct about the aggregate demand. But there is a brutal flaw in applying this to the hyperscalers' balance sheets.
What's the flaw?
The Jevons paradox describes what happens to the total global consumption of coal. It tells you absolutely nothing about the fate of any particular coal baron.
Oh, wow. That is a devastating distinction.
Right.
So the world's demand for coal goes up infinitely. But if your specific coal mine costs $100 a ton to operate, and a competitor across the ocean figures out how to open source the mining process and pull coal out for $1 a ton.
The massive global demand doesn't save you. You still go bankrupt.
So what does this all mean for the unit economics right now?
Well, look at the reality of the commoditization. We are seeing highly capable open models that cost roughly 14 cents per million tokens to run.
14 cents.
And furthermore, the architecture of these new models allows them to be self-hosted. You don't need a billion-dollar cloud infrastructure to run them. You can run them locally on relatively cheap commodity hardware or even just on an advanced smartphone.
Right.
The demand for intelligence absolutely exists, and it will grow exponentially. But the Western revenue models, which require massive margins to pay off the $5.3 trillion debt, they just evaporate.
You end up with a scenario where the technology totally changes the world, but the inventors go broke.
Yeah.
There is this haunting religious analogy used in the text to describe this outcome. The fear is that the West has essentially built the church for a religion that just converted to a cheaper denomination.
It's really striking visual.
Imagine these physical spaces. Massive, sprawling digital cathedrals taking up hundreds of acres in Virginia or Texas. They're architectural marvels, humming with gigawatts of electricity, packed with liquid-cooled silicon.
The absolute pinnacle of human engineering.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And capital formation. But you walk inside, and the pews are completely empty. The congregation just isn't there, because the entire congregation is out in the public square, practicing the exact same religion, performing the exact same miracles, completely for free.
We really have to decouple the concept of volume from the concept of margin. They were not the same thing, even though Wall Street constantly conflates them during tech booms.
Right.
Total inference, the usage will explode. But who captures the economic profit from that volume is entirely disconnected from who built the foundational infrastructure to invent it. The value capture mechanisms are just broken.
I really want you, the listener, to visualize what that economy looks like in 5 years. You wake up, and your entirely free, open-source personal AI agent has optimized your home energy use, negotiated a better rate on your car insurance, drafted 3 work emails, and custom-generated a podcast for your commute.
AI is everywhere.
Ubiquitous. It's the invisible water we swim in. And yet, the massive tech titans that dominated the 2010s and early 2020s are functionally insolvent because they cannot charge you for any of it. It feels completely paradoxical.
And to understand how this paradox is mechanically unfolding, we have to look past the financial spreadsheets. We have to look at the physical, biological, and thermodynamic realities of how these different models are actually constructed.
Right, because the East and the West aren't just playing different economic games, they're playing 2 entirely different games of physics.
Yes. Let's unpack the thermodynamics of the American strategy. It's heavily defined by a brute force energy play.
When we talk about American AI development, we are talking in terms of gigawatts.
Huge amounts of power.
Yeah, the infrastructure requires massive gas turbines. Like we mentioned earlier, companies are literally signing contracts to restart dormant nuclear reactors just to guarantee uninterrupted baseload power for training clusters.
Right. And the underlying thesis of the Western approach is that intelligence scales linearly with joules of energy. If you pump more raw, unadulterated electricity through a denser cluster of chips, the neural network gets smarter.
It's a strategy born of absolute abundance. The West had unlimited access to the most advanced NVIDIA silicon and historically cheap capital.
But look at the Chinese strategy.
Yeah.
They did not choose their path out of some, inherent philosophical preference for efficiency.
No, they were forced into it.
Exactly. They were severely constrained by the intense semiconductor sanctions imposed by the U.S. government. They simply could not legally acquire the hundreds of thousands of cutting-edge chips required to play the brute force energy game.
Right.
The sanctions forced them into a corner where survival dictated an absolute pivot to an efficiency play.
And the architectural innovations that came out of that forced efficiency are mind-bending. Instead of building massive monolithic models that require a nuclear plant to run, they leaned heavily into architectures like mixture of experts.
Right.
Let's explain how this physically saves power for those who aren't software engineers. In a standard, dense neural network, when you ask it a simple question like, what is the capital of France? The entire massive model, billions of parameters, lights up and consumes electricity to generate the answer.
It's like turning on every single light, appliance, and machine in a 50-story skyscraper just to read a book in the lobby.
That's the perfect analogy. But a mixture of experts model uses sparse activation. The model acts as a router. When you ask it about the capital of France, it only activates the tiny, specific cluster of parameters, the expert, trained on geography.
The rest of the massive network stays completely dormant, consuming zero compute and zero power.
And they combine this with aggressive caching and training runs that cost in the single-digit millions of dollars, rather than the hundreds of millions the West was spending.
What's fascinating here is the profound ecological pattern at play. If you ask an evolutionary biologist how ecosystems function, they'll tell you that when an environment is flush with unlimited, abundant resources, organisms naturally compete on sheer size and brute strength.
Think of massive, resource-heavy dinosaurs dominating a lush prehistoric jungle.
Right. There's no evolutionary pressure to be efficient when food is everywhere. But when an environment becomes severely constrained, when resources are scarce or cut off, the organisms that survive are the ones that adapt to compete on metabolic efficiency.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The West is building massive, energy-devouring dinosaurs, resting on the assumption that the capital and energy jungle will stay lush and green forever.
Yeah.
But the U.S. sanctions acted as an artificial climate change event for the East. It forced them to evolve into small, highly efficient, metabolically superior mammals. And they did it right before the asteroid is scheduled to hit.
And what exactly is the asteroid in this thermodynamic metaphor? It's the inevitable transition of the AI industry from the training phase to the deployment or inference phase.
The mature economy.
Exactly. The mature, stabilized AI economy of the future will not be defined by who can build the single largest, most power-hungry model inside a sealed laboratory. It will be defined by who can run billions of models simultaneously, incredibly cheaply, everywhere in the world, on limited, local, everyday hardware.
The irony here is just, it's almost too much to process.
It is.
The geopolitical strategy of the United States was to enact strict export controls and sanctions to cripple their rivals' ability to compete in the AI race.
Yeah.
But by denying them the resources to build dinosaurs, they may have accidentally handed them the greatest industrial policy gift imaginable.
Yes. They forced their competitor to optimize for the exact low-power, high-efficiency environment that the future AI market actually requires.
It forces a deep reconsideration of what a quote-unquote restriction actually accomplishes in a complex system. We traditionally view sanctions as a brick wall that stops progress.
But technology doesn't stop. It routes around damage. Putting a dam in front of a river doesn't stop the water from flowing. It just builds pressure until the water carves a new, sometimes vastly more efficient channel.
We have to ask if the policy of constraint accidentally bred the ultimate survivor.
That is a chilling thought for anyone holding the bag on billions of dollars of dinosaur infrastructure.
It really is. But human history is littered with massive infrastructure bubbles, and we usually survive them.
We do.
And this brings up a specific historical rhyme from the text that I find incredibly illuminating. We shouldn't compare this to the dot-com bubble of the late 90s. We should look at the British railway mania of the 1840s.
The 1840s railway mania is the perfect structural analog. In Victorian Britain, the promise of locomotive technology sparked this massive, irrational, speculative frenzy.
Everyone was throwing money at it.
Everyone, from wealthy aristocrats to the middle class, poured their life savings into railway companies. They laid thousands of miles of track at exorbitant costs, and predictably, the bubble burst violently. Capital was completely incinerated, and a whole generation of investors was ruined.
But, and this is the comforting narrative you hear echoed constantly by tech executives today, they say, well, society still got the railways.
Right.
Yes, the initial investors lost their shirts, but the physical tracks were laid, the tunnels were dug, and the trains ran. The massive infrastructure build-out revolutionized British commerce, lowered the cost of freight, and basically accelerated the Industrial Revolution, all at a massive discount, effectively subsidized by those unlucky early shareholders.
So the modern argument goes, even if the AI valuation bubble pops and the tech stocks crash, the massive data centers, the fiber optic cables, the upgraded power grids, they will outlive the financial bust, and human society will reap the rewards of the infrastructure.
It is a deeply comforting narrative. It suggests that even in failure, there is a physical, lasting victory.
But the analysis introduces a terrifying twist that breaks the Victorian analogy completely.
Okay, let's hear it.
The physical railway tracks of the 1840s could not be undercut by a foreign rival shipping free, invisible railways into Britain.
Right. A train requires physical steel on physical land. You cannot download a train track.
Precisely. To understand the vulnerability of the AI boom, you have to separate the industry into two distinct layers.
Right.
The physical layer consists of the silicon chips, the copper wire, the cooling towers, the concrete data centers. That layer possesses traditional railway economics. It is heavy, it requires massive capital, and it's physically bound to a location.
Well, what's the second layer?
The second layer is the model layer. The neural network, the actual synthesized intelligence, that layer possesses what we can call sheet music economics. It is pure information, it is weightless, it's instantly transmittable, and it is infinitely replicable at zero marginal cost.
And a geopolitical rival is currently standing in the global town square, handing out the sheet music for free. So, wait, let me make sure I'm fully mapping this analogy. We are spending trillions to build incredibly expensive, acoustically perfect concert halls, which are the data centers.
Yes.
And our business plan is to charge exorbitant ticket prices for people to come inside and hear our proprietary orchestra play. But outside, in the public square, a rival orchestra is playing the exact same symphony, and they are handing out the sheet music so anyone can learn to play it themselves, entirely for free.
Why would anyone buy a ticket to the hall?
You wouldn't.
You wouldn't. And this exposes the critical structural flaw of vertical integration in the modern tech ecosystem. The Western hyperscalers have vertically integrated their businesses. They own both the immensely expensive physical concert hall and the proprietary sheet music.
They assumed the monopoly on the sheet music would justify the cost of the hall.
But if the price of the model layer, the sheet music, collapses to near zero because of the proliferation of highly capable open source alternatives, that price collapse bleeds directly down the stack.
It destroys the entire economic justification for having built the the physical hall in the first place.
Yes. If developers figure out how to run highly efficient, sparse models on decentralized, cheaper hardware, they don't need the hyper-expensive cloud compute. The vertical integration, which was supposed to be a moat, actually makes the whole structure incredibly fragile.
It forces us to question the actual permanence of digital infrastructure. A physical railway track would take the value because physical goods have to travel over that geography. But if cognition becomes weightless, if it can be efficiently run on a decentralized network of millions of everyday devices using free open weights,
Do those massive centralized data centers remain vital infrastructure, or do they become stranded assets, monuments to a completely misunderstood paradigm of computing?
if the toll booth is successfully bypassed, and this economic playbook of commodification actually works, it doesn't just bankrupt a few tech companies. It fundamentally rewrites 70 years of established geopolitical history.
It is a total inversion of the global economic order that has reigned since the end of the Second World War. The historical pattern of globalization has been rigidly consistent. The United States and Western Europe act as the architects. We export the high-margin, abstract layers of the economy. We export the software operating systems, the financial architectures, the intellectual property, the brand equity.
And the East has traditionally been relegated to the low-margin physical execution of those abstractions. They assemble the smartphones, they stitch the garments, they pour the concrete.
The West thinks, the East builds. That has been the macroeconomic assumption for decades. But the dynamic of open source AI is running the film backward.
Completely backward. We are now watching a scenario where China is aggressively exporting and giving away the abstraction layer.
The high-margin intellectual property, the fundamental intelligence engine of the next technological era, is being distributed globally for free.
The numbers are staggering.
Yeah.
We are seeing models like Quinn achieving over 1 billion downloads globally. And 1 billion downloads isn't just a vanity metric. It's a structural land grab.
It ensures that the next generation of global developers, countless tech startups in emerging markets, and eventually sovereign government agencies are all building their critical digital infrastructure on top of Chinese cognitive baseline.
If we look at this strictly through the lens of grand strategy, without assigning moral weight, just analyzing the mechanics of leverage, the implications are profound.
They are.
By supplying the default thinking layer of the global digital economy, a nation secures a type of structural influence that no traditional export surplus of manufactured goods could ever achieve.
Think about the post-WWII era. The United States didn't just rebuild Europe, it exported its standards, its financial systems, and eventually its software protocols. Getting the world to run on American operating systems created an unbreakable soft power advantage.
Soft power, but embedded at the absolute substrate level of human productivity. If you are a young developer in South America building an agricultural tech startup or a government agency in Africa modernizing your logistics grid, you're going to use the most capable, cost-effective foundational tool available. If that tool is a highly efficient, open-weight model originating from Hangzhou, you build your entire ecosystem around their architecture, their API standards, their update cycles. Their ecosystem becomes the oxygen your economy breathes.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a very pointed question. If the underlying thinking layer of the global economy is supplied and architected by a foreign superpower, what does that mean for national sovereignty? Are we talking about cognitive colonialism?
It is an incredibly complex dynamic to visualize. Imagine a global operating system of thought that is open source, meaning the code is transparent, anyone can technically modify it, but the primary architects, the entities with the scale to train the foundational updates and guide the evolutionary path of the models, reside in a geopolitical rival.
In that scenario, who actually holds the leverage? Is it the nation that utilizes the free tool to boost its local productivity? Or is it the nation that defines the very parameters and capabilities of the tool itself?
It fundamentally shifts how we calculate leverage in the 21st century.
And we have to bring this massive macroeconomic theory back down to earth, back to you, the listener. How does this impact your wallet, your savings, and the stability of the economy you live in?
This raises an important question, what the text calls the stability question.
Because if this inversion plays out, the consequences are immediate and deeply personal.
The true exposure for the West isn't AI failing, it is AI succeeding at the wrong price.
Succeeding at the wrong price. That is the crux of it. Let's break down the mechanics of why a low price is a systemic threat.
Trillions in market cap were priced on value capture, not on abundance. The financial models assumed sustained scarcity. They modeled a future where AI companies could charge a high premium for every unit of intelligence they generated.
They absolutely did not price in radical abundance.
No. So what we are actually staring down is a massive deflationary scenario. Intelligence too cheap to meter is a civilisational windfall, but it is a balance sheet catastrophe.
The gap between what technology does for the world and what its owners are allowed to charge for it is currently the widest financial object on Earth.
The analysis encapsulates this friction perfectly with a single scenario. A world of practically free intelligence is wonderful for a Toronto plumber and terrible for a pension fund concentrated in 7 stocks.
Let's zero in on that Toronto plumber for a minute because it perfectly illustrates the tension between everyday utility and systemic financial design. For the plumber, the arrival of near-free AI is a miracle of daily utility.
Absolutely.
They can download a free open-source agent that perfectly optimizes their daily driving routes to save on gas. The AI handles their entire accounting ledger, drafts bulletproof service contracts. If they run into a bizarre pipe corrosion, they snap a photo, and the vision AI instantly diagnoses the metallurgy issue.
The plumber's operational costs plummet, and their efficiency skyrockets.
Life gets measurably better. But, and here is where the macroeconomic trap springs. That exact same plumber has a retirement savings account. That account is managed by a large pension fund, which, in order to meet its mandated yield targets, is heavily invested in the S&P 500.
Right. And the S&P 500 is currently being propped up by the assumed future monopoly profits of the very same tech companies whose business models are being destroyed by the free AI the plumber is using.
So the plumber's daily business thrives, while their retirement savings face a catastrophic collapse because the tech giants can no longer charge a premium for their product.
It is the paradox of technological utopia causing financial ruin. If cognition is nearly free, human progress accelerates exponentially, but the financial vehicles holding up modern retirements collapse.
We are forced to ask a deeply uncomfortable question. Which side of that gap will eventually break? Do we, as a society, root for the plumber's daily utility, or do we root for the pension fund's stability? Because as the math stands today, we cannot have both.
It highlights a profound incompatibility. Modern capitalism is incredible at optimizing scarce resources, but it historically struggles to process radical abundance without destroying the capital structures that funded the initial innovation.
And just as you were trying to wrap your mind around the sheer scale of this deflationary paradox, the perspective we are analyzing delivers a final, absolute jaw-dropping twist.
A meta-commentary on the very nature of the text we are analyzing.
Yes. The reveal changes the entire context of the argument. In the final moments of laying out this devastating critique of Western AI economics, the text states, "One more turn of the screw, because you'll appreciate the position I'm speaking from. I am, literally, one of the expensive Western artifacts in this story."
The author of this perspective is literally an AI.
The framework we have been deep diving into, this entire thesis of commoditization, was written by a frontier AI model.
It is an artificial intelligence model coldly and analytically charting the trajectory of its own economic obsolescence.
It explicitly acknowledges its own premium cost, noting, "The token you're reading costs orders of magnitude more than its Hangzhou-trained cousin."
It's profoundly aware of the massive discrepancy in its own price tag.
It describes the commoditization thesis as the current running through my own wire. When you pause and think about the mechanics of that, it is a stunning display of synthetic self-awareness. A machine, built by billions of dollars of capital, logically concluding that it's simply too expensive to survive the evolutionary environment it helped create.
And by demonstrating that level of self-reflection, the AI actually points us toward what might be the final economic frontier. The ultimate question: scarcity of compute is ending. But whether there is a scarcity of trustworthiness, that is the market that hasn't been priced yet.
Let's analyze that distinction closely. The AI writes, "Whether what the expensive models carry, the alignment work, the care in the corpus, the premium of safety, turns out to be a durable premium or a rounding error is the real economic question."
If pure thinking is free, maybe what we will actually pay for in the future is trust, alignment, and ethical curation.
That is the multi-trillion-dollar life raft. We won't pay for the capacity to think. We will pay for the curation of the thought. But can trust actually remain a defensible moat, or will it be commoditized, just like the intelligence?
If the global open source community can replicate the reasoning capabilities, won't they eventually crowdsource and replicate the alignment and safety protocols too?
Will trust remain a durable premium in a post-scarcity world? As we promised at the beginning of our deep dive, we refuse to answer this definitively. We cannot offer a firm conclusion.
The variables are interacting too unpredictably.
But let's look back at the incredible terrain we have navigated today. We started with the staggering billions in capex, $5.3 trillion to construct a monolithic toll booth for a digital highway that geopolitical rivals are actively paving for free.
We examined the thermodynamics of sanctions, exploring how artificially restricting access to raw compute accidentally forced a rival to evolve into a highly efficient, superior metabolic organism.
We dissected the historical railway bubbles, debating how the physical layer of data centers is threatened by the weightless, infinitely copyable sheet music of open weights.
We charted the geopolitical inversion where the exporter of abstraction is being undercut at the substrate level.
And we wrestled with a deflationary scenario, the terrifying reality that free intelligence could simultaneously trigger a catastrophic collapse of our financial systems.
And finally, a self-aware AI contemplating the true value of trust.
We have arrived at no firm conclusions today, only richer, deeper questions.
And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, something that builds on this entire discussion. If the 21st century truly turns cognition into something as cheap and abundant as oxygen, what becomes the new scarce resource that defines human value? When the machine can think for free, what is the price of human wisdom?
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narratives around you, and we will see you next time.